Alright, this is lesson 1-5, subtracting real numbers. And again, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I know most of you have seen it and you should be pretty good at it. So this is more of a review, and then tomorrow you'll have an opportunity to work with me on it and ask any questions that you have. But it's very similar to lesson 11 or 1-4 with the rules. When you're subtracting a negative, you're always going to add. You drop both negatives. Okay, you have to be very careful about when you're allowed to do this. So look at the example and make sure that's the only time you do this. So if I ask you to simplify -4 subtracting -9, I'm not dropping these negatives. I'm looking at this. It's that rule I was talking about, or in 11, or I keep saying 11, sorry, in 1-4, negative times negative is a positive here. So these right here combine and become one positive. This stays negative. So you bring down your -4, this becomes your positive and your 9. And then you simplify from there. You have opposite signs and you're adding. When you're adding opposite signs, take the sign from the greater absolute value, find the difference. So the difference between 9 and 4 is going to be 5, and this is your greater absolute value, so positive 5. If we were subtracting something like -6 subtracting 2, this is the rule we talked about yesterday, same sign, so you just go ahead and add them and keep them the same sign. And if you get confused about that rule, the other way to look at this negative sign, I could rewrite this as a -6 plus a -2. Same sign, add them, keep them the same sign. So once I combine those, I end up with a -8. Okay, there's some absolute values you're going to come across. This is example 3 in the book, just so you know. And they ask you to simplify. And I mentioned this the other day in your notes, but we'll go over it right now so you can kind of see it again. So remember, with your absolute values, you always simplify the operations in the absolute value before dropping any negatives. Okay, you need to make sure you do that. So the example is the absolute value of 5 subtracting 11. So what I don't want you to do here is say, oh, I can't have a negative, so I'm just going to add these. You need to think simplify, then take absolute value. So I simplify what's in there, keep my absolute value. The difference, because they're opposite signs, so the difference right here is 6. Negative goes with the 11, which is the larger. So -6. Now I take the absolute value of my answer, and that is 6. So try this one right now. Go ahead and hit pause, simplify it, and then hit play when you're ready. So what I would do if I was simplifying this, again I'm looking at what's inside first. I have a negative times a negative there, which is a positive, so this becomes plus 10. I keep my absolute value, so a negative 4 plus 10. Now I can simplify within absolute value. So opposite signs, the difference between the two is 6, positive. So the absolute value of a positive 6, which ends up being 6. If you had just dropped all your negatives immediately, you would have had 14. So that's why it's important to simplify within it first. Okay, and there's one more example. I told you these would be quick lessons, because I think with these it's just more important that you practice the rules than really going over all that much. And example 4, we're not going to write anything about it because you already know it's an evaluate. Negative a subtracting b for a equals negative 3 and b equals negative 5. And I am actually going to write one little reminder over here, even though we've already talked about it. Value goes in parentheses. Really important. What I mean by that is I have my negative here that goes in front of that a, and now I'm going to plug in a. And then I have my negative here that goes in front of b, and now I'm going to plug in b. Extremely important that you don't say, oh, there's a negative a and it already has a negative, so I'm just going to put a 3 there. Because if you notice already, most of you probably noticed, negative negative here actually ends up becoming positive. If you forgot to plug that second negative in, you'd have a negative here. So now you simplify this and you get a positive 3. You simplify this double negative and you get positive 5, and you end up with 8. And that's it for lesson 11.4 or 11.5. There is an application problem, but it's very similar to yesterday's, and so you'll just apply these skills to the same thing.